there's a quote that the rich man is not the one that has the most, but needs the least. And the poor man is not the one that has the least, but needs the most. Now, when I think about this quote, I think about this idea of contentment and of happiness. And in general in life, we think the more things we have, the more money we have, the more friends we have, maybe the more power or position that we have, we're going to get this sense of happiness, this sense of contentment. Life's fulfilled if we have all of these things. But according to this quote, it's not the one that has the most that makes you rich, i.e., life is good. It's actually the person that needs the least. How does that make any sense? How can you need the least? How does that make you content? It's not. So again, my understanding is it's not about whether you have a house or you don't have a house. But now that you have a house, for example, do you want a better house? Are you content with the house that you have? Do you want a bigger house or more flashy house? Do you want to put more things in the house, etc.? You have a car. Do you want the next model up? Is that what you're always thinking about? And then when you get the next model up, your thoughts then dwell on, oh, I want to get the next thing. That gives you a sense of contentment. If you have and you're okay with it, you're content. The person that needs the least. If you have and you need more and more and more, you're the person that needs the most. So in essence, irrespective of how much physical things you have, how much money you have, you are quite poor inside. You're constantly seeking, you're constantly wanting. So this idea of happiness, it's fleeting if you think about it. It's always evading us because we think that happiness comes from the outside, comes from the external world. Happiness comes from inside, in fact. So there was a book I read. It was called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Fantastic book, very good read. And it depicts the story of this person who's searching for treasure. And he searches everywhere. He travels around the whole world, and he goes on this incredible journey and adventure of trying to find this treasure. He doesn't find it anywhere. He goes through the deserts and he goes through the jungles and he's looking everywhere but doesn't find it anywhere. Eventually, he ends up going back to where he started. And he used to sit on this rock, from what I remember. It's been a while since I read the story. And he looks underneath the rock, and lo and behold, there is the treasure. And when I read that story, when I read that book, for me, it just felt like, my God, this is such a good analogy for happiness, for this constant seeking of happiness. We seek happiness in worldly pursuits, having an incredibly successful career, buying lots of things, dreaming of lots of different ideas that we think that will make us happy, make us content. Whereas, in fact, all of those things are external, they're fleeting, they don't actually give you that lasting happiness. The lasting happiness comes from inside. It's actually how you see life, your attitude, your mindset towards life, towards scenarios. That's what actually creates that happiness. About 8 years ago, I had the fortune, actually it was about 10 years ago, had the fortune to spend time in India. And whilst I was there, I happened to be living in a slum. And I was living in this slum, and I was living with a host and a hostess. And one day, and they were very poor, and the hostess had been knocked over by a bike. She came home and she was injured, and I was living there at the time, and I overheard an argument between the host and the hostess where I was living. And they were arguing about the fact that, do they spend the next month's worth of money that comes in on her medicines to cure her and help her, bandages and all of these things, or do they spend it on food for the family, i.e. for the children in essence? And I was just shocked at such a sorry state of affairs that these people were in. I offered to help, and I went out and I was just like, look, can I help out? I was staying there. Compared to them, obviously these were slum dwellers. They were very, very poor. By the sense of the world, they're very poor. And I tried to offer help. And they turned around to me and they said, look, we appreciate your offer, but we are okay with where God has placed us. This is just another place where we're at, and God is testing us. I think that's kind of the expression that they used. We're okay, God always provides for us. And they had a genuine contentment for life. They accepted where they were. They loved the idea of, in their house, it was very basic. They'd love to have had a fridge. They'd love to have had a fan. But they accepted where they were. There was a genuine sense of acceptance. And by and large, they were very content with life. They were very happy people by many measures of what happiness is. And I inevitably bought them the medicine. It happened to be Diwali time, and as a gift I offered them the medicines and the bandages and whatnot, because for me I couldn't see them in that state. But this idea of happiness having to be being wealthy or being rich, from my experience and my example, I don't think that's necessarily the case. It's a mindset, it's a attitude of mind.